Make it plain.
Make it plain.
M.I.P.
With Masamela Matfumo.
Mark Thompson.
Make it plain.
Get woke.
God bless you. Get woke. Folks, MIP is now COVID-free, meaning free to all subscribers as we navigate this pandemic. We're thinking about everyone, and we've got to get through this together. So for a limited time, no fee to subscribe to Make It Plain on your favorite podcast app. Ladies and gentlemen, of course, many of you, all of us are very concerned about the case of Ahmaud Arbery and many others for that matter. One organization I regret, and I probably have been somewhat delinquent, we've not checked in with one another in a while. I'll take responsibility for that. But it too is one of my favorite organizations doing very important work. It is the Coalition to Stop Gun Violence. We are very blessed today to be joined by its executive director, our good friend Josh Horwitz, and the director of African American Outreach, Kayla Hicks. Welcome, both of you. First of all, let me ask, Josh, I pray that you and your loved ones are safe and well.
We are. Thank you for asking, and I appreciate that. And hope the same to you as well.
So far, so good. Kayla, how about you? How are you? You safe and sound? Your family,
all is well.
Loved ones?
Yep, all is well. Thank you.
That's good. You all are sheltering in place, but clearly the gun nuts aren't, Josh. We've been seeing some of these protests, obviously. But now this case with Ahmaud Arbery, it's very chilling, isn't it, Josh? It's
chilling. It reminds me of work, we've been fighting this for generations, for centuries, right? But to see it today is still jarring. It reminds me that, I started my career doing civil rights work in Mississippi, and this was an issue that I worked on, 35 years ago. And it's part of our American history, but it's a terrible part. And I think what I'm seeing and what it really still bothers me is that we are arming hate. We are making it easy for people to open carry. We are making it easy for people to have all sorts of weaponry, high capacity magazines. And a lot of this is about power and hatred, and we're making it too easy.
Kayla, what was your reaction when you first heard this story and saw that video?
So I didn't watch the video. I have trauma fatigue as a Black woman, and I have 3 adult Black sons who like to run. So my first reaction was that of a daily one, because we see this one in the press, but there are so many that are not spoken about that it becomes almost a norm. And I think, like most moms, you just check on yours. You just want to make sure they're okay in that moment, and you want to remind them that we're not okay. So my first reaction was, again, another bit of trauma added to the reoccurring trauma, and learning how to compartmentalize it so it doesn't take over my entire day. So it was just very traumatic as a mom. And then being in this space, it was very, it made me angry.
Josh, do we know anything about Ahmaud's killers with respect to them having guns, licenses, permits, or just whatever? Do we know anything about that?
That hasn't been reported enough, but here's the bottom line. They're in Georgia, right? And so Georgia is, a state where it's easy to carry weapons openly, concealed. Their legislature has made it easier to get carry a concealed weapon, carry open weapons. You can buy guns without a background check in Georgia. You can carry guns where you want. And it is, the legislature is absolutely made it as easy as possible for anybody to get a gun. So the idea, I don't know if these guys are legal gun owners, but that doesn't tell you much, because we're not doing a lot of we're not doing a lot of background type of information, or we're not, there's other states like you live in New York where they're doing real serious looks at who should have firearms. That's not what happens in Georgia.
Yeah, yeah, it's kind of open season down there, isn't it?
Absolutely.
And this has not happened in Wisconsin per se. But Kayla, what did somebody say when they finally got the court to overrule extending lockdown? They were bragging. Patrons went in the bar and was saying, "This is the Wild Wild West," and it was like they were proud of it. Those words don't comfort those of us who are African American, though, do they?
No, they don't. They don't. And, I believe that the challenge we have is making sure that, in these leadership roles and very public facing roles, and being the information that some people will only get, that we have to be careful how we respond in these spaces. And primarily, I think my biggest focus is on how it's leading more anger. We know anger is not a primary response, right? We know that hurt, that deep-rooted hurt. But I have a lot of African American males. I am a responsible gun owner myself. But Josh and I talk about this. It's just part of, we just said it's like a part of our DNA. The immediate response in conversations that I had were, Black men, and their response of feeling like they have the right to start protecting their families. And it's just very scary when you start thinking about what that will look like if there is a response. So, I feel like that's only going to escalate more action in our communities. It's kind of like a slow rolling machine that's going to kind of take hold and not be able to be pulled back without some serious damage being done.
Right. And Kayla, too, that's another caveat in this conversation. Can we, as African Americans, particularly as Black men, protect ourselves? We know about the case with Breonna Taylor, and her husband or boyfriend or whatever he was, I think was trying to protect. I mean, we've also seen cases, Josh, where African Americans felt they had a right to some type of castle doctrine, and it's a double standard. It's we're not allowed to do that. Right, Kayla?
I think that it's not that we're not allowed, right? We know that we are, right? But Mark, I think it's more or less, we know that there's a different ending for us. So I'm in Virginia, and I used to open carry. It was normal for me to do so, but I stopped because I used to feel so uncomfortable with the way individuals that don't look like me would look at me. And I remember the moment, which was almost 2 years ago, when I stopped open carrying. I was in my vehicle and I had my weapon on me, and I was getting in, and there was a gentleman next to me that was watching me, and I could not understand why. And, he just walked around my car, and he stood there and he stared at me. And I got out of my car because I was going to take off my jacket. I had on a business jacket, but my gun was, was not over my gun. So I got to take the jacket off, and he looked at me like as if I was a threat to him. And I thought in that second, you don't have to be a Black man to die for lawfully carrying a gun. So I just decided that it wasn't worth it. And I knew every morning that I did get up. I think one thing that as a gun owner, we have to always admit is that every morning when I get up and if I carried my firearm, I always have to say, I'm okay with killing someone today. And that's a hard reality when you are a gun owner. That's a hard reality. You carry a firearm for just for defense mechanisms, but what does that defense look like? That means you're discharging a deadly weapon. So I really stopped carrying because I wasn't comfortable with that answer too much anymore. But more importantly, because I did not want to be a statistic. I didn't want to be a hashtag say her name. And it's not okay for Black people to carry. I don't care what the law says. Think about Constitution. The Constitution was never meant to represent us. It's almost, going back to Dred Scott, 1955. I think people don't realize that, we're not so far away from those same behaviors. There's no excuse for the behavior that we have to deal with every day. But, hopefully, we'll talk more about it, eventually. But Black gun owners are aware of their rights and they're exercising them. And each time something happens, I get a new set of phone calls, a new set of emails of people saying, I want to learn how to shoot. I want to get a gun. Can you help me? And it's very scary.
So, Josh, talk to us about what measures, what legislation, what have you, that we should be advocating for to prevent another Ahmaud Arbery like a Trayvon Martin. What should we be trying to do to prevent that from happening again?
Well, so I come mostly from a lens of gun policy, right? But there's obviously much more than gun policy that goes here, right? I mean, so there is, there's a power dynamic and racism that are behind all of this, and I think we need to recognize that. And there's much work to do beyond firearms on this, and that is, confronting power dynamics, confronting racism, and calling it what it is. But on the firearm part of this, we are arming hate. We are making it so easy for people who, who are hell bent on hating people to have firearms. And I'll give you two examples of how that plays out. We shouldn't be carrying shotguns just willy nilly down the street. We should be able to open carry willy nilly down the street. Now, if it's available, everybody should be able to take advantage of it. But my feeling is that we should really be striving for a more peaceable society, and we should be and what guns do is they make hate lethal. And so we need to say it's not we need to start getting to a point where we don't have to carry guns. People don't feel like they have to carry guns, and part of that is the normalization of all of this, right? And carrying, walking around the neighborhood with a shotgun in the middle of the day, to me, is just asking for trouble, right? There's no need to do any of that. So a couple of things. I think the stand your ground law is a problem, and I think it can never be administered fairly, right? And I think that we need to repeal that in general, because just think of what stand your ground changed. It changed hundreds of years of doctrine that said, if you can walk away, you should. If you don't have to spill blood, you should. Stand your ground says it's okay to spill blood. Like, it can never be applied fairly, and it gives a horrible message that it's okay to spill blood even if you don't have to. And I just can't. I think that's a terrible message overall, but mixing that with armed hate is a terrible thing. But let me draw a connection also to what's going on in the Capitol in Lansing, in Michigan, what's happened in Richmond, where people, use guns to push their political and hateful ideology. Yesterday they closed down. Michigan legislature closed rather than worrying about how to confront people. And this is, and one of the reasons I believe this is happening is because I can tell you where I live in Virginia, and for certain, we are getting a more diverse legislature. We're the first female Speaker of the House. We have more African Americans. We have more people, LGBTQ folks in our legislature. And I will tell you that people who've had privilege for many, many years are uncomfortable with that, and they now want to come and close that down. And what I see there is, when I was in charge, everybody else had to live by the rules. But now that other people are in charge, I don't want to live by the rules, right? And to me, so that's another piece of policy that I really want to see. I don't want guns at the Capitol. I don't want open carry in the Capitol. I don't want to have to confront that. I think that is and Kayla and I have both seen this. We've been there, and people with guns are, flashing them at us, we're trying to testify, and they're not responsible like Kayla. They're like, hey, look what I got, and trying to show that they're more powerful than we are. That is a terrible precedent, and it's bad for our country. It's bad for what we want, and we're fighting so hard for voting rights to make sure people can vote. And we know that people want to, prevent Black and brown people from voting, and yet we're allowing people to come to the Capitals, intimidate those very legislators that they elected. That makes no sense to me. That's got to stop.
Kayla, what you just described in terms of your personal experience and your decision to no longer open carry and all of that, I mean, that was very compelling and very moving. But there is, sort of a bipolarity in that as human beings. You know, one's nature, human nature, is to protect oneself.
Mhm.
And yet, you know, Du Bois talked about in general our double consciousness, our two
Mhm.
irreconcilable strivings. But if we were to boil that down to guns, it's as if your first instinct was very natural. I'm gonna carry this gun around. I'm Kayla, I'm carrying a gun. But then the other thing that, as you clearly pointed out, that we all go through, that you conflicted with, was, well, I don't really want to carry a gun because I don't want to do harm to anyone and I shouldn't have to. But both of those poles, to me, just still leave us in a place for the time being, unless Josh can, and we can work with Josh to get the change in policy and legislation we need. We just out here, you know, and that's, so even as compelling as your statement was, it's very sobering. It's a little scary too. You are a responsible gun owner. You cannot carry a gun, not just because you don't want to, you don't feel it's right. Your spirit's not gonna allow you to do it anymore. But, and then the people looking at you like, that's the other thing. So if I'm in the car with you and they're looking at you and you have a gun, they might shoot both of us just on GP.
Right.
Because you a woman carrying a gun and I'm in the car with you. We're just not, it's as if we're not supposed to defend ourselves. It's jarring.
Yeah. You know, I like that. We out here. That should be the next podcast. I really like that one. Show up on that one any day. But it's a harsh reality. We are looked at as gun users, not as responsible gun owners. So we will always make most very uncomfortable, because when they're looking at me, it's almost like as if I don't have the right to have that gun. How dare I? Because let's just get down to it. When you ask people about why do you carry that gun? Because I had to protect myself from what? From somebody robbing or trying to harm my family. Like who? Well, no, I actually don't, because when I wake up in my house, I'm not thinking, well, let me arm myself up because there might be some white guys that are going to actually come in here or might kill me or kill somebody that I love. And you know what? There's evidence that shows that happens. And yet here I am as a woman of color, as many of us do. We don't go outside with that thought. However, the times have changed, because there are many people waking up with that thought. They are not only, it's humbling to see that there is change. We know that there are a lot of people working to address the issues that we have when it comes to gun violence in Black communities and Black people. It's very humbling, because I see there are a lot of people that are putting it all on the line, but it's not enough. It's not enough. And it's hard to say that sometimes, because I've had conversations where there are white people that are really putting it all on the line. And it's like, they're not saying, well, just be lucky I'm here. They're literally saying, I cannot process why this is happening. And I want to help. I don't know what more I can do. And it's kind of like being a Black person. Well, you're just going to have to keep doing it, because there's no other option. We out here. I mean, I'm going to live with, that's my new hashtag. We out here. Like, that's it.
Take it. It's yours. It's all yours.
We out here. So, policy is very important. As Josh said, there's so much more that goes beyond that. When I was watching the gentleman and I was looking for his name, I'm a retired bounty hunter and still a private detective. And I'm trying to find the young man that was jogging down the street with the TV, because that's very triggering for me and for others to watch a white man freely run down the street with a television that's trying to do something that's good, but ultimately it's just triggering, because it's like, this guy is running with a TV. My kid could run down the street with a hoodie on and die just because of that. And that's a real threat. His was just for show. Even though he was running, he carries no burden beyond that. Right. So where do we go from there? We're out here, but I got some ideals, but the question is where do we go from here? And I think a lot of the responsibility goes back on white people, because who put these laws on the books that we're talking about, these policies that we want to dismantle, the system we want to disrupt? Who did this? It's not us. Who has the power? We make up 13% of the population. How what can we do?
Josh, armed with hate, and that's a very succinct and accurate, arming hate is a very succinct and accurate way of putting it. I think a part of that too, isn't it, Josh? The people who do this kind of stuff know, with the, being hateful, being armed for hate, and with, you mentioned the power dynamic.
Yeah.
They know they can do a lot of this and get away with it, don't they?
That's right. That's right. And double standard, right? I mean, it's people who feel like they've got privilege, and they have the privilege to walk up in the Capitol with an AR-15 and be greeted like, "Oh yeah, you're here," right? That shouldn't be allowed, and it needs to be called out for what it is. Right? It's hate, it's racism, and it's at the barrel of a gun. And going back to what Kayla says is, we've allowed that to happen, and we've allowed that disparity and dichotomy to exist. Like, how come nothing happens to those folks? How come people who intimidate other people are like, please go away, right? That's not, our response should be, you're disrupting this country. You're disrupting this legislature. That in my view, should be prohibited. And you can tell that, like, law enforcement is deferential to that. And as a society, we need to change that. We need to show what it is, which is armed hate from people who don't want to lose power. And it's race, it's gender, right? It's armed white men saying, it's always been, we've been in power, and now we're going to say we're in power with the gun. But going back again to what Kayla said is, what we need to do in this country is we need to show that we care. We need to invest in communities, right? Guns are one piece of this. But if we cared, right, if we cared about that, we'd invest in schools. We'd invest in employment opportunities, in community college, in housing, right? We would not at this moment be like, oh, maybe someone can get by on a $1,200 check, right? Like, what we need to do as a country is show that that we care, that we need, that we need to take on an anti-racism framework, which is, we need to invest in our communities, we need to invest in our people, and at the same time, we need to decrease the easy availability of weapons, right? Those things all go together. Yeah. And when we said I'm out there because right now, it's easy to feel like no one cares, and we're all in this alone. And that's, those are choices that get made. They get made because it's better to give big corporations tax cut than get kids into community college, right? Yeah. That's a choice that we make. That leads to the root causes of inequality. That leads to people wanting to arm up. And we need all these things. These are not isolated things. You just don't say, oh, we can do something about guns without saying we need to go back and say, and for me, the buzzword these days, it's really important, is health disparities. We've created a country where the health of our most vulnerable citizens, right? We don't care. Like, it's expendable. It's expendable in COVID. It's expendable with guns. If we cared, if we wanted some people to feel like they weren't out there by themselves, they would feel our country coming around and saying, we care. We're going to invest in better healthcare in these communities, right? We're going to invest in violence interruption programs. We're going to invest in opportunities and jobs. But that's why you feel out there. And that's, to me, what we're talking about. I do guns. That's what I do. I do gun policy. But it's a symptom, right? It's a symptom of a larger thing, that life is expendable in certain communities. And that's unacceptable.
Let me drill down on at least a point in that. And when you talk about education and investing in others, I mean, every other country in the world is paying everybody's salary and bills. We can't do that. So, but we're also talking about those who are armed and hateful and dangerous. Access to education. See, because when you're educated, and then Kayla, that's why, we fought to integrate schools, fought to integrate universities, affirmative action. But people, so that people could be, and this is important, y'all, all this goes together, as Josh is saying. When people are in a learning environment together, the goal is, and this happens more often than not, I guess, in a learning environment, people are also learning diversity in other cultures and learning about other people and being willing to see them and share space with them and then tolerate them. You know, so when I hear you say education, Josh, I'm assuming you mean everybody, because that's the way I see it. People who shoot black folk like that can't be educated. There can't be any kind of education other than an education of pure white supremacy. You know, going to KK University. Am I right? I mean, when you talk about education, we're talking about education universally, so that people understand it's not right to continue legacies of racism.
Right. And, you know, Kill and I, we work together a lot. But one of the things that we found to be important is education means being together.
Yeah.
It means simple things like this. It means like breaking bread together. Right.
Yeah.
Learning
all
from
that.
each other.
Right.
Right. And if you're not willing to do that, if you look at someone like they're the other and you're not willing to do that, you'll never be educated.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And it wasn't, you know, in my life, it wasn't, you know, breaking bread, sharing experiences. You know, that's what makes that's in addition to your ability to read and write, that's what makes you educated. But as a country, what I'm getting is we don't encourage that.
Yeah.
You know, we don't encourage that at all. And, you know,
especially the man at the top doesn't encourage it. He likes it.
And dismantling things like affirmative action and things like that, right? That just makes it less and less diverse, right?
Yeah.
And people can stay in their little pods. You know, that's not healthy. That's not educated. That's not knowing people, right? We don't, you know, nothing. We don't encourage travel. Now, we can't travel today, but this is a country where, like, people are like proud of the fact, oh, I've never been out of my county. I've never been out of my state. Forget about going to Europe or Africa or Haiti or, you know, I remember being, as a kid, went to Haiti when I was 5 years old. It was transformative. You know, it was one of those experiences that was transformative. My parents took me there, and travel matters, and we don't encourage it. We don't support it. All these different things, you know.
You've been exposed. You've had exposure to a larger worldview. Kayla, you said trauma fatigue. Let's try this on for a minute, because this has been going through my mind as well. We've had so much gun violence. I mean, gun violence and gun deaths in this country were like the virus before this virus. Mm-hmm. Okay. And let's be honest, what happened? People got a level of fatigue and numbness and anesthetization from that experience. You know, things would happen, and then this is it. This is going to make everything change. And then it would just be numbed. Mm-hmm. The end result of all that numbness, I mean, that numbness happens subsequent to death. So it almost is a logical flow that some are numb to the deaths that this virus is calling because they've already had a dress rehearsal from being numbed to gun violence. Death is death is death, isn't it?
Yes. The short answer is yes. We combined an epidemic with a pandemic. And there was not enough education for people to understand that when we started seeing, you know, people say shut down and stay in, there was no open education for Black and Brown communities to understand how to live, you know, in close quarters, especially where you're talking about populations of poverty. You know, how to survive and how to be safe in that environment. But more importantly, the world outside of Black and Brown faces began to believe that, oh, well, you know, nobody's going to kill each other or shoot each other because it's a pandemic. They really believed that a pandemic equaled trauma-informed care. Like, for some reason, it was a trauma fairy that came along, sprinkled some dust, and said, nobody's traumatized. Now pay attention to the pandemic and stay home because it could kill you. Yeah. And then it came out weeks later after, you know, social media had circulated that Black people can't get COVID, right? Black people don't get it, right? That was out there for a long time. And because there's no trust with media and relationships outside of our communities, you know, the most important connection to the Black community is that mama, that big mama, that woman, that one. There's that one woman that everybody is going to listen to and be like, yeah, she's looking out for us. And because she said it, that nobody went out and talked to us and give us what we needed. And I just feel like, it's not a wake-up call. Like, this is not a wake-up call. This is just another level of numbness. And now you're going to combine this numbness with, so we have this shooting, right? We have so many of them. I try not to name individual people because there's so many people that are not going to ever be named, that collectively, I think when I say the African-American males and females that are being injured and murdered by the use of force with firearm, is so normal that now I was sitting with a friend yesterday. I was just moving something, and he had to he's a law enforcement, had to get COVID tested, and thank God he came back negative. And we were talking about his experiences, but more importantly, he's got a phone call from his mother. It said dinner was she was cooking dinner for him to come by, and she said, I need you to come on over. And he said, okay, Mom, I'm going to come for dinner. But I said, well, what does your mom cook for dinner? And he said, she's got some pig feet, some pig ears, and got some chitlins in the pot. And I was just like, oh, Lord. I said, well, as a Black man, you shouldn't eat that. And he stopped and looked at me in all seriousness. And I said, because that's going to kill you. He said, nothing's safe for Black people. So why does it matter what I eat if it's going to kill me? And that was a harsh reality, because I had to stop and say, you know what? I can no longer joke around or even tell people for health purposes, don't eat that, because it's like, why not? Somebody's going to kill me anyway. It's like, there are so many levels of numbness and acceptance of this violence and behavior that it's going to take a village. And the reality of the statement, if it's going to take a village, and putting those wagons in a circle, it's like back in the Wild Wild West, the cowboys with those wagons in a circle to protect the, right. Listen, it's going to take a collective effort, and we're all not going to look alike. We have to, everybody has to come to the table. I need for, the white population to challenge themselves. Like, they did I was talking to a friend a couple of days ago about the bucket challenge, where they put ice over their head or something. It was a long time ago. Like, do something for a cause. So if you're going to run, then what are you going to do next? Do challenges where you're sitting at home with your most racist uncle or aunt or granny, or, have these conversations. What are you afraid of? And then come back and talk to us as communities so we can start figuring out, because the numbness is real. And when someone like myself has to admit that even I have become somewhat numb, that should be really scary for society in itself, when you have woke people that are literally woke, with education experience, say that they're numb. That should cause pause for a lot of people. I wonder, Mark, as you as a Black male, are you numb to it? Do you find yourself being numb?
I would be dishonest, intellectually dishonest, to say that I'm not numb. But even my context is larger. I was a student and a follower of Dr. Frances Cress Welsing. And she used to talk about gun violence in the Black community, and how there were always things for us to protest and stop. And she was talking about gun violence in the Black community before a lot of our gun advocacy organizations were. I mean, we're talking about, 40, 50 years ago.
Right.
And she challenged all of us as a Black community, said, how can you care more about anything else but that? And it happened so often in our community, we became numb to it. It just was a reality. It just happened. And to me, numbness is defined by inaction. So we ain't doing anything about Columbine. We ain't doing anything about Sandy Hook. We ain't do, all these situations. So while we can mourn, and we really can't mourn right now, because this is not even a situation you can mourn. Mourning is hugging and touching and embrace. We can't do any of that right now. So that's going to be an ongoing trauma and closure unresolved. But as long as we don't do anything, we may as well all be numb. And I've seen people who are passionate about what happened to Ahmaud and Breonna and Deshaun Reed in Indianapolis. I've heard from white folks who I've not heard from in years. who were literally traumatized by that video.
Mhm.
But still, to me, the numbness is in the inactions. At some point, this culture has to decide, enough of this. Other cultures are living around the world, functioning, as you said earlier, Josh, paying folks' bills and putting folks' guns away and folks not shooting each other. So what is it about this space here that we're in that prevents that? But I thank you for asking me that. Josh, let me ask you this, and then I want to go to action and plans and what we want people to leave here with assignments to do. But first, Josh, I need you to help me reconcile something too.
Yeah.
They bought up all these guns, with Obama because he was coming to get their guns.
Right.
Trump's not coming to get their guns.
Yeah.
So what's the deal with all the guns now? They think Obama's coming back to get them? Help me.
Yeah.
Because we know gun sales have gone up in the pandemic.
Right. So what happened, fascinatingly, in the first couple of years of the Trump administration, gun sales were considerably down from the Obama levels. And it wasn't until it wasn't until the Democrats took control of the House,
Mhm.
gun sales started to rise. That was 2 years after Trump was elected.
Mhm.
And now with this, right? And so it's interesting. I mean, there's a real political response and a fear response. And I think those are somewhat related, but it's also, it's encouraged, right, by the gun industry right now, who had a couple of years of low sales during the Trump administration. They want this to happen. They make it easy to happen. They don't feel much responsibility. They feel responsibility to sell weapons and increase their bottom line. But there seems to be a response in this country now where if there's a president we don't like, we're going to buy guns. If something happens, we're going to go buy guns. And it seems to be a response to a lot of different issues. And
Yeah.
what we're going to see down the road because of this, and this is fact. This is a public health fact, more death.
Mhm.
That's what we're going to see. Is if current levels of death aren't enough, we're going to see more. We're going to see more homicide and more suicide.
Right.
Yes, more deaths in the home. And I will say, what we are seeing now is something unusual. That is, in the African American community, gun suicide was very uncommon. It's now on the rise. And it's something that we do not want to ignore, and we don't want to get numb to that either. Right? It's unusual. We need to call it unusual and understand what's going on.
No, and I meant to commend you for that too, because that's the lead article, the lead link at CSGV.org, folks, Coalition to Stop Gun Violence. And you can imagine that. See, that was the other thing, Kayla, when you talked about having a gun. So that's the other thing that's risky, because I'm too aware, having worked with Josh and others over the years, the risk of guns in the home and what happens in particularly stressful situations like this, and how many people end up turning those guns on each other. So you either got crazy Trump folk shooting people, or you got other folk at home despairing, depressed, and taking their own lives because, $1,200 don't pay for nothing. Okay, Josh, action plans, assignments, and then Kayla, I want to hear something from you. Talk to us about people listening. What can they get involved in? What can they do right now? So
a couple of things I think you should do right now. One is when you see what's going on in the legislature, when you see what's going on with Ahmaud Arbery, you got to realize there's a root of racism and armed hate that are coming together. And there's attitudes that we need to change, but actions are going to speak larger than words here, right? And so we need, in my view, two parts of this equation. One is what I work on every day, which is I want to get rid of open carry. I want to make it harder to carry concealed weapons. And I want to ban guns in every single capital in this country. I've been personally know what happens when you're walking down the hall or trying to testify and someone flashes a gun at you. It's not democracy. Okay, that's number one. From a bigger picture, though, we've got to change the investment dynamic in this country, and we've got to invest in communities for better mental health care, better primary health care, better opportunities for education. And so what does that mean? It means getting out there and voting. This started. This election is like no other. This is an election that wherever you come from will be the most important election potentially certainly of our lives, but could be of ever, right? So we've got to get out there and vote. We've got to commit to show up when a lot of times people want to phone in to the state legislatures or just write a postcard. You got to show up too. If there are people that are armed showing up, you got to show up. Something we've done in Virginia, Kayla and I worked on together with some of our colleagues, is showing up when it matters, when votes are being taken, when it matters, and for everybody to do that. And it really does change things, right? Breaking down barriers to voting, but really it takes two things, at least two things, and it is better gun policy, which I've laid out, and putting, if you care about stopping these shootings, if you care about, and if you want to stop being numb, you got to act like you're not numb, which means saying time to invest, time to put our resources in these communities. And I don't know that I can stop someone's hatred in their heart, but I know that we can change and act like a society that cares, that matters, that doesn't value the values, that devalues racism. And doing that is putting our budget where it matters and putting our gun policy where it matters. You can find all about a lot of that at our website. And the other thing that's really important for everybody who lives in a state that has a great state gun violence prevention group or violence interrupter program, get involved. It's time.
Yeah, get involved. Kayla, what would you add in terms of what you'd like to see people do, take on, be assigned?
I would like to add the actions that people can do to assist in reducing death and injury by firearm. Is to first make sure that they're being inclusive to the communities that are directly impacted. And when we say that we are engaging impacted communities, do the work and start with what we have as our pact, policy. Identify a piece of policy that we're going to work on and rally around. And if we don't have policy that we like, then draft it and have someone help you understand what that means. And advocacy is key. I think we know that goes back to, for everything that we have today, here and now, is because of grassroots advocacy. So find out who's supporting what and how they're supporting and get involved. And then community. Community is the heart of everything. It's the relationships that matter. I know, I'm going to speak myself as a Black person. I can see somebody coming 10,000 miles away if they're not right. If they're coming to me saying, oh, I need you to help me, I can tell if they just want me to help them get a picture with Black people to say, look, we're working with Black communities, or if they really want to come in. I don't have time for it. I'm not the one. I've never been that kind of person. So it's like you want to make sure, keep it real. You want to be woke, then be real woke and do the work. And the technical assistance, having organizations like the Ed Fund and the Coalition to be there with you, making sure that that policy is not just drafted, but it gets implemented. And we are forced as Black people to run marathons that we never prepared for, that we don't want to run, and we never set out to do. It was never my life's goal to get up and run a marathon for the rest of my life. I'm tired, but every time I decide I want to slow up, something like this happens. Someone's child is dead. Someone's spouse is gone, or there's this relationship where people don't understand the value of making sure that the budget and the money follow the money, no matter where you go and what you do. I don't care who's talking to you, even if it's me. Who's investing in what? Follow the money and you'll know where the heart of that organization or that person is, because we need to make sure that wraparound services that are underfunded are funded. These are the services that we need to survive in our communities. It's just like saying, pull up your bootstraps. When people say that, well, that old saying, if you have no boots, what are you going to pull up then? Your toes? How far can you pull a toe? Not very far, right? So we're looking at making sure that we're investing in the communities, making sure that the funding is there, and just having the education to whatever a person's doing, make a pact: policy, advocacy, community, and technical assistance, to make sure that they have the right team there supporting them with that evidence-based research, have a holistic approach, and just make sure that you're authentic in your movement, in your work, because I am always watching, and we've got the Ed Fund and so many other people that are watching now, because it's a new day and a new way of doing things. We're doing stuff online now, but eventually we're going to have to get back in the world. And when we get out there, what are we going to be prepared to do?
That's right. That's right. Appreciate you both. folks, we ask you to go to csgv.org, get involved. Don't be numb in terms of action. Treat the numbness with action. Treat the despair, the anger, the trauma, the emotion, the passion with action. Go to csgv.org, one of my favorite organizations. Josh, as always, appreciate your vigilance, my brother.
Thank you for having me.
Keep that up, and let's stay in closer touch.
Absolutely.
Kayla Hicks, Director of African American Outreach. She out here, y'all. And we're glad of that. And we need her. We need to be out here too. We out here anyway, whether we want to admit it or not. Thank you, Kayla Hicks and Josh Horwitz. Again, folks, csgv.org. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mark.
All right.
Thank you.
God, you are our refuge. Send our ancestors to guard our doors. Cast out this virus from our communities and our bodies. Heal, bless, and protect everyone listening and their loved ones. Thank you for listening to Make It Plain and Get Woke. Remember to listen, like, and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever you get your podcasts. If all minds are clear, it has been made plain.